First of all, and this every few years, you see a headline right up to today. Oh, street photography is dead. Yeah, sure it is. At the time, back then, the internet was still relatively new. And at that time, if you looked for street photography on the web, you would find dead photographers or stuff from the 50s and 60s and 70s. As you said, up to Winogrand or Robert Frank, and then there wasn't anything else. And yet there were people still making pictures, still doing something, still having something to say that was new and contemporary. And I think when it was founded, that was the idea to say, no, it's not dead. There are plenty of contemporary photographers making fine images. We are the new street photography on the web. And then it spread from there huge. I think it helped kickstart the genre, the entire revival of the genre, because people could see it. There's that saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of Eyeshot 50mm. And today we're sitting down with Richard Bram. Richard Bram has spent more than 40 years observing the quiet theater of everyday life. Rather than chasing dramatic events, his photographs really reveal the fleeting moments and gestures and subtle relationships and unexpected situations that often go unnoticed. Richard is also a founding member of the influential collective In Public and has also helped redefine contemporary street photography, reminding us that every ordinary moment hides an extraordinary story. Richard, thank you so much for being with me today, and welcome.
It's a great pleasure, Lucrezia, to be part of Eyeshot, and I'm looking forward to it.
Richard's limited edition book with Eyeshot, Restless Eye, is available for pre-order until September 30th. So I advise everybody who has a passion for street photography to go check it out. And before we start, I just want to leave a very, very, very small message to everybody who's watching to keep liking and keep subscribing, because what's a very, very small click to you, it means the world for us. Now, Richard, actually, let's dive into the fun part. And I want to immediately start off by discussing a little bit about your origin first and how you became a photographer, your decision, instinct, education as well. Because if I'm not mistaken, you did not study photography or did any traditional artistic kind of educational path, but you studied political science like me and worked in business before actually deciding in 1985 perhaps, okay, to call yourself a photographer. So what made that decision possible at that particular time?
Well, let's just say that the regular business career never seemed to work out for me. I had a lot of different jobs, first in international business, which was my master's degree, but undergraduate at Arizona State University, I studied a lot of art history and architecture history. And these are things that still mean a lot to me, and I think that's informed my vision. But in direct answer to your question, in early 84, my last, what we laughingly call real job ended. I, with the encouragement of some friends, I'd always liked taking pictures, but I never studied it. The thought of, oh, well, you can be a photographer just wasn't in my head. But I said, okay, maybe all these other jobs have not worked out. Maybe I should try doing something I actually enjoy doing. So I said, okay, I'm a photographer. And armed with what I call ignorance and courage, I went forth to be very hungry for a couple of years because I had the art, but I did not have the craft. It wasn't in my fingers, which is where it has to be. And I had to accumulate equipment. I knew that how ignorant I was and that I needed to learn a lot in a big hurry. So I took a course in the local darkroom. I'd never run a roll of black and white film. I'd never made a print. I'd never worked in a darkroom, and I had to learn quickly. So I took a quick course and I went to the library because the library is where the knowledge is. and it doesn't cost you anything. I think I went through the entire collection of the Louisville Free Public Library system. I didn't read all of it, but I skimmed it. I took something off the shelf. I looked and went, loved it or didn't like it. And then my first regular photographic gig became doing the public relations photography for the library system. They didn't pay very much, but I wasn't very good. So it was kind of a fair trade. But I learned a lot doing that and set up a career eventually as a public relations photographer. It just started with a lot of pictures of people standing around with drinks in their hands, cocktail parties, receptions, just ordinary work. But after a few years, first of all, I did learn very quickly. I got a few lucky breaks because Louisville, Kentucky was a relatively small city. And within a few years, I had a regular practice as a commercial public relations photographer.
That's so interesting. I love this because sometimes people really expect like a very well-formed artistic career, but it can come legit from anything. And you just proved it, like for completely different life path.
I mean, I was 32 years old and didn't know what I wanted to do. And I knew what I did not want to do. And that was enough motivation right there. I mean, I remember my
Exactly.
mother saying, "That's nice, dear, don't you need a job?"
That's a nice hobby.
Yeah, and I think throughout most of my life, even when I was a very busy working photographer, she said it didn't quite occur to her that it was more than a hobby. That's how our parents are, you know. But yeah, it's what I wanted to do, and it worked out because I found something that I love.
Absolutely. Your early professionals, as you said before, work included events, public relation, exactly, commercial assignments and everything. What
Hmm.
did working in situations like those that you could not fully control teach you instead about anticipating the human behavior, which is that skill that street photographers kind of have to walk through?
I think it was excellent training because even if you're photographing some business guy talking into a microphone and making a speech, you watch him for a little while until you see that we all make the same gestures. And I'm shooting on film, okay? So I can't just bam, 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 bam. So you watch and you see he does this. But while he's talking, his mouth is moving, you can't really make the picture. But you listen to his speech patterns. You watch the way he makes his gestures. You set up the shot, put the frame in, and then when he makes the gesture and stops talking for a fraction of a second, click, and that's the
Love
picture.
it.
So this is the same skill that becomes unconscious over time. And that's what leads you to make a street photograph. Only you have to do it much faster because you can't sit and watch. You can only watch the general situation. But if you're standing around in the street with a camera held up to your face like this for a long time, nah, forget it.
And I'm curious because you're largely, without largely, you're self taught, absolutely 100%. How did you learn then to distinguish a genuinely strong photograph from a photograph that instead didn't have that much power?
This is a crazy story. My first big job was the Kentucky Derby Festival. And I did that for 12 years. And for the first few years, me and the other two photographers, I was the junior guy because they brought me in 1986. We had to produce a slideshow overnight with all the film we had shot over the previous 2 weeks. And we had to do a 3 projector slideshow, chunk, 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 um, from those pictures set to that year's Derby Festival theme song. And so the lab would run our film overnight. We'd go over to one guy's house and we would sit there and just go over with a loop. Boom, 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 boom. You learn to edit really fast because we had no time. And the sign of a good edit was the full wastebasket. Just loads of slides right into the trash. You got two that are close. You look close. Which one has a little bit more of a gesture or maybe an eye looking this way or something? Anything to make it a little better than the other one. And doing that edit under pressure is what helped teach me what is a good picture. And the other thing is, I looked at a lot of art over the all those years. And so not consciously, but unconsciously, I had sort of internalized the fundamentals of composition, at least in Western art. It's different in African art and it's different in Oriental art or
Absolutely.
anywhere else. But the basics were in the back of my head. They became unconscious. They were, as I said, in my fingers, not in my head.
Because this is interesting that you said that, because I've read that you've spoken about your admiration for Peter Bruegel. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, whose painting, I looked it up, contained many simultaneous actions and stories all in just in one frame. What did painting exactly, I want to explore this more, teach
Mhm.
you that photography alone could not?
Well, I mean, if you want to know about light, let's say you're doing even a street portrait, if you look at the old master portraits, those guys knew everything about light. Yes, they had the time to do it, but like right now, I have a bright light on this side of my face. This is in shadow. But in those 17th, 18th century pictures where they had those big white collars, remember those crazy collars?
Yeah,
That reflects white light up into their face. And
correct.
then if you look at, I don't know, it's like, and where is the shadow and the flat background? Does it set off the hair? Does it do this? Is it a light over here where it's dark and dark over here where the sitter is light? Those are, and now that's when you have time to think about it.
Yes,
So, but in the street, for example, if someone is strongly sunlit on one side with a dark background, they're going to jump out. I mean, this becomes a cliche. And I don't mean this badly because he's one of the great masters. Alex Webb does this a lot with
absolutely.
the things against dark backgrounds are very quickly but carefully done. I mean, we don't see the pictures that he throws in the wastebasket,
Absolutely.
as we all do. But the ones that he has chosen or the ones that I have chosen are excellent because they have all of that. And that helps you edit your pictures. It may not help you make the click of the shutter, but that's how you know when you have a good picture when you're looking at them later.
A lot of your work is of not interested at all in the city, but rather in the way people negotiate being seen, being together, being observed, ignored as well, crowded, isolated within the city. What have decades of photographing public life taught you about how human beings live together?
I'm not so sure it's taught me
Nothing.
much. It's all a bit crazy. In the street, I mean, people do very similar things because we're
Yes,
all negotiating a crowd. We're mothers are dealing with their children who may be sweet or they may be driving them crazy at that moment. People are getting out of each other's way. Someone is impatient. People are just trying to move through a big crowd, or they're standing off to the side, making a gesture like that when they're talking. And sometimes a gesture can just be a look. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But that's to me, that's what makes a picture live. I have made pictures of people just walking down the street, just like everyone else. But most of those, to me, it's not enough. Okay, that's somebody walking down the street. But is there something in their face that suggests that maybe there's really something going on inside? Is there a picture of someone standing in front of a sign is not enough. Having made a lot of them myself, some have even been famous, but it has to have another layer of something to
to
lift it
it.
above just that. I want more than one thing to be visible in that rectangle.
Okay,
I
perfect.
don't know if
Because
that answers your question.
it does. It definitely does. In fact, I love it because I wanted to connect to something else that I know that you've said, because you have described street photography, street photographs as very short stories. So fragments that lead the viewers to imagine also what happened before and what would have happened next. And I want to discuss this a little bit more because it's a very interesting concept. And I wanted to ask you, is a photograph successful when it explains a situation, or it gives a certain uncertainty towards who watches it, looks at it?
For me, I think I want the uncertainty. If it's all laid out and it's all plain,
It's boring.
what's going to draw you in? What's going to make you want to know more?
Yeah.
Can you imagine a story around it? And it's like, oh, what's going on here? I'm not sure. Hmm. Let me think about that. That to me makes a more interesting photograph. When I think of other, other people's famous photographs, I think Richard Calvar has a picture where there's some feet sticking out of a bush. And it's like,
Crazy.
what is going on here? And to me, that works because I'm going, what is going on here? I'm
Yeah.
asking questions, yet my eye does not leave the photograph.
You do not stage your scene, but
No,
framing and timing can radically transform their meaning of the scenes. How different is that transformation? This is a little bit also provocatory, of course.
of
How
course.
different is that transformation from inventing a fiction?
Well, I think when you click a shutter, it goes from reality to fiction just automatically because reality is 4 dimensions because there's time.
Yeah,
A rectangle is 3 dimensions. So it's frozen, it's pulled out, it has completely out of context. Someone might be going like this, but they might be then continuing on to be giving someone a big hug. But at the moment the shutters click, they could be going like this. And you wonder, oh, there's something going on. There may not be,
sure.
but it is a fiction because it doesn't have the continuous before and after. And that's one of those things we have to make a picture work. You only have that moment. And if it isn't in there in the moment, it doesn't matter what was you heard before, what you saw after, doesn't matter. Whereas
I
in
know.
reality, of course, it does.
Now I want to change gears a little bit and I want to discuss about in public and the return of street photography and collective photography like that in that sense because I know you were a big part of it. When you joined in public in the early 2000, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken,
2000, 2001.
2001, perfect. Street photography was often, let's say, discussed as though its most important work already belonged to history. Like it was already been done, everything was right, everything has been shot, Winogrand, Friedlander, all of them, Arbus, everyone. What did the group instead feel is still needed to prove in the world of photography?
Well, first of all, and this every few years, you see a headline right up to today. Oh, street photography is dead. Well, yeah, maybe, yeah, sure it is. At the time, back then, the internet was still relatively new. I mean, I only got my first computer in 1994. So that was like 5 years, 6, 7 years before. And at that time, if you looked for street photography on the web, you would find dead photographers or stuff from the 50s and 60s and 70s. As you said, up to Winogrand or Robert Frank, and then there wasn't anything else. And yet there were people still making pictures, still doing something, still having something to say that was new and contemporary. And I think when it was founded, that was the idea to say, no, it's not dead. There are plenty of contemporary photographers making fine images and here we are the new street photography on the web. And then it spread from there huge. I think it helped kickstart the entire revival of the genre because people could see it. There's that saying, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So now we could see it.
Okay. At the time, as you just said, actually, the internet wasn't really, was helping, I guess, was starting to help discover photographers and building like different communities. Today, instead, the same internet produces enormous quantities of images that kind of like imitate recognizable street photographers or important street
Mhm.
photo formulas. At what point did visibility then become a repetition?
I think it cannot be helped because there are so many. I mean, it's a million to one compared to what it was then. And now the good thing is there's discovery, at least from a Western eye, of the huge variety of street photography around the world. I mean, there's tremendous work being done everywhere. The Philippines, Japan, India, Thailand, Australia, Latin America, Africa, it's everywhere, but we're not aware of it because it was not being published in our little Western world. And this has also changed the way it's perceived. The opposite is there's still not a lot of learning about the genre and its history so that when someone says, "Oh, that's just a cliche," you know why someone says it's just a cliche. It's like if I see another picture of someone walking through steam in New York, it's like, "Dear, not again." I've done them too, but it's been done a million times, and you really have to have something very, very special to make something different from something we've seen a million times before.
And that's the toughest part.
Yep.
Another thing you said that it really struck me a lot was that you argued that a photograph must stand on its own and cannot be rescued by the difficulty of making it or by the photographer's memories, which is incredible. And I wanted to ask you, was this a principle you always understood or one you learned through experience and I guess painful editing as well?
Very painful editing. The more you see, the more you realize that, it's just, okay, I've done that before. This one didn't quite work because of that. The balance is off. There's too much empty space over here. Um, yeah, the person was interesting, but is it a photograph? Is it a story in a rectangle? Because our memory fills in all those other details, but it may not be in the picture. Of course, our book will be black and white. But for example, in color, you may have something really strong in the front, but there's somewhere in the back of the frame is somebody with a red fluorescent jacket. Now, I will not change that because I'm just enough of a purist street photographer. Yes, we can change anything today. I won't do it. I will, but that ruins the picture because what I want in the front, but my eye keeps going to that red jacket, and that's too much of a distraction. You might be able to crop it out a little bit, but I don't want to do a lot of cropping. Yes, I crop my pictures, but I won't do a lot. And if it isn't there, it doesn't work. There's more pictures. There's always more pictures. And yeah, I really love that thing, but it just doesn't work.
So you've worked both in black and white and in color. And I wanted to ask you, particularly for you, what does color do that black and white doesn't, and vice versa? And how do you decide which one you want to go for?
Well, it is a difficult question. I mean, someone had this statement, which is glib a long time ago, and I used to believe it, which is in color, in black and white, you look at the faces. In color, you look at the clothes.
Huh,
But I think that's not quite so true anymore because we're much more used to looking at color and the clothes don't distract in my own color photographs.
sure.
But when I made the conscious decision in 2010 and 11 to go to color in my personal work, it was hard. It was really hard. And it's more difficult to do color photography well because you have so many more variables that can go wrong. I mean, in black and white, you have all the same problems of contrast and setting and background. And is it well lit? Can you dodge it? Can you burn it? Whatever. And you get all those wonderful graphic qualities of it's drawing versus painting. If you look at, let's say, an artist in the 1400s, let's say Paolo Cello,
Yes,
the early Renaissance painter, his drawings are gorgeous. But when you see the painting, they're a little stiff. It's harder to do. And I think that applies to photography as well. So black and white gives you that wonderful graphic quality. And sometimes it can give you an intensity that you will not get in color. I think in the work that we've chosen from Occupy Wall Street, which is going to be on the cover of Restless Eye, that contact sheet, I shot that event in color and black and white. I had two cameras with me, and they have two completely different feelings. Even though I might have shot two pictures right in a row that are almost exactly the same, they feel completely different.
Different.
It's like two different photographers shot them. And I think it's a matter of choice. These days, I have a harder time doing black and white because I'm just not used to it anymore.
Also, I guess like maybe this wasn't exactly for you, but also this the advent of digital cameras and have completely changed our way of understanding black and white and color.
Yes, completely. I mean, it was my switch to color was partly tool driven because
Yeah,
that's when now I've not because it's a legendary camera, it costs a lot of money, but I've been using old Leicas for my personal work for a long time. And I was never comfortable with a big DSLR or big camera on the street. It was just too
yeah.
obvious. But a little Leica, because the Fujis weren't there yet or the Sonys weren't there yet, I don't want to disrespect any brand. If it works for you, great. When Leica came out with the M9 in whenever that was, 2010, 2011, this was a good practical camera. I knew how it worked. I knew how it felt. I was used to the technical qualities, but it was color and it was good color. And so I went forth with that.
Yeah.
And that's really when I switched completely to color was because of that particular digital camera. I had been using color digital in my corporate work and PR work
Yeah.
for since 2004. But as I say, I wasn't really that comfortable with it on the street until much later.
And still staying on the topic of, I guess, method, practice, and everything like that, what's the role of post production in your photographs? Do you try to keep them as raw as possible? Is something you just need to fix kind of a things? What role does it play for you?
There's always okay, everything goes into Lightroom, and in Lightroom, I do general corrections, the same things I
Yeah,
would do in a darkroom. Lighter,
exactly.
darker, maybe change because it's color, I'll change the color balance and contrast a little bit. There's almost never radical changes. Then when I put it out to make a print for an exhibition or just even to show, I will then use Photoshop and do a little bit more burning and dodging, just the way I would in a darkroom.
Darkroom, yes.
And the advantage of digital is you can do really subtle, tiny, slight changes. But again, slight. I'm not hitting it with a hammer. I'm using a little brush, very slight. Back in the 40s and 50s, W. Eugene Smith was using tiny little brushes with bleach to work on his prints in the darkroom, cyanide bleach, right? Poisonous materials. It's another nice thing we don't have to deal with anymore. But you can now do that digitally and just go, again, small.
Slightly. Mm-hmm.
And it comes out of being a darkroom photographer for a long. And as I say, I don't change color. I won't alter or remove anything.
Anything. Still staying on practice and everything. And we've already discussed this, but I want everybody to know our thoughts. And, photographers often become very attached to their pictures because of where they were, the people they met,
Sure.
their feelings, and everything like that. How do you separate the emotional value of an experience from the visual value of the photograph you shot?
I think the farther away it is from me in time, the easier it is to do. Because when I'm immediately swept up in something, I'm seeing and feeling all of that. But the more the time recedes, the easier it is to deal with it. Right now, I'm looking at negatives from the 80s and 90s. And it's so long ago. The things I thought were really great then, I look at them today and go, and other times I'll look at, why didn't I see that picture? That because my tastes have evolved and I'm no longer emotionally attached. I think you published the book of Blake Andrews, and he takes a long time between taking his pictures and even processing them and looking at them. And that
Exactly.
gives him that emotional distance.
And can an initially overlooked photograph then become important because time has changed the way you read it then?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Even if it's their formal qualities have not changed, let's say.
Yeah. I just
Okay.
didn't notice it. Or what has happened a lot as I go through, and I think this happens to all photographers who have years and years of experience when they go back through their pictures and find things that, how could I have missed that? It's because you see, oh, I've got to print that. But then something else happens and you go on, and then you come upon it 2 years later. Oh, I've got to print that. And something happens and you go on. And eventually now it's like, okay, don't let that go. Do it now.
Exactly, exactly. Now, Richard, you should what are the lenses you use the most?
I'd say 35, 35
Third,
millimeter lens on a full frame camera.
because
I rarely use a
yeah,
50. In my working life, I could do almost 95% of my work with three lenses: a 24 real wide, a 35 for most things, and a 105 for longer lenses. Or on the Leica, it happened to be a 90, just because the way they make their lenses. But those, I could do everything with those, and mostly with a 35, and I still mostly use a 35.
because as we all know, Bresson famously viewed the 50 millimeters instead like as the natural lens and the extent of human eye and everything, whereas many contemporary street photographers use 28, 35, like also like you said. How do you think, do you relate to that 50 millimeters philosophy when navigating dense scenes like London? Does it demand a more intimate, I guess, psychological connection, or does it enforce instead a sharper detachment, if that makes sense?
First of all, contrary to popular belief, Bresson also used a 35 sometimes. And when he was, back in the 1930s, when he and Kertész and everyone else were beginning, 50 was all that was available. That was the lens or the equivalent thereof. So you just, when you don't have the choices, that actually saves you some trouble because you don't have to think about it. It's like, this is what I have. The 50 generally tended to be too tight. I'm usually in a little closer. And I don't agree that the 50 is the natural vision. I think our vision is a little wider than that. And I think the 35 felt more natural. Now, because I wear glasses, my view is a little narrower because I don't have quite as much peripheral vision, and the 35 may make up for that, some of that. And I use a Leica Q, which is a fixed 28. But the way I look at that is, oh, good, I can crop it a little more. It gives me a little more room for error,
Absolutely.
and I've gotten used to it. Uh, but mostly it's the 35. If I'm going to grab a camera and walk out of the house, it'll be have a 35 on.
Okay, interesting. Now, Richard, I want to switch completely gears, not really completely,
Okay.
but still. And I want to talk about Restless Eye and I guess the psychology behind Restless Eye in a way. Let's start from the title, which again, I feel like it truly evokes almost, I guess, a biological compulsion to observe. But you will tell me this. And I wanted to ask you, first of all, how this restlessness evolved in your years.
Well, I've always been on the road. When I moved around America a lot growing up, my business career took me all over the country. When I met my wife and moved to London, we were on the road. We were traveling even then, while I was getting used to being in a completely new place. And I've always been traveling, and I'm always looking for something new. I get, I have a short span of attention. I get easily bored and I want to see something new. I mean, I'll go almost anywhere especially if I haven't been there before.
I love it.
I may not get any pictures because when you travel and you go someplace new, at first you're just absorbing the newness. And it takes a while for that to settle down so you can see what's going on and make some photographs.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's just what I am. I'm always looking around and saying, "What's that? What's that?" I see a little alleyway. Oh, what's over there?
So
Curiosity.
restless, yeah, would have been like kind of like a synonym, let's say, of rest of your photography, being curious, being always out, being always walking, and everything like that. Restless
Hmm.
Eye also draws from several decades of work, as we've been saying so far. When you look across such a long archive, what recurring obsessions did you discover that you maybe had not consciously recognized while walking the streets of the world?
Well, essentially, it's the same thing. I'm looking for the same thing no matter where I am. I'm looking for a human relation. I'm looking for a gesture. I'm looking for something that um this that will ask a question when I put it in a rectangle. I mean, it doesn't matter where we are. I mean, some places I can't get pictures for some time because I'm not quite sure what's going on, which may or may not be good, but there we are. I don't know if that answers the question, but I'm
Yeah.
just sort of wandering here.
No, 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 absolutely. In fact, I wanted to follow up on this and I wanted to
Please.
ask you when if someone doesn't know you and takes Restless Eye and opens it for the first time, what do you hope your work would convey to someone looking at your work for the very, very first time?
Okay, that's an interesting question I've not had before. I hope they'll be drawn in and want to know more. It's like, "Oh, that's an interesting picture from Mexico. Does he have more of these? Well, look what he's seeing here. That's crazy. What is going on here?" Like the picture that you have on the publicity thing of the boy with the gun, the little boy with a gun from
Crazy.
Mexico. It's like, whoa, what's happening here? And, and I can explain it, but I'm not going to, just for fun. But it could be someone getting, like, you see some kids playing in, I don't know if this probably is in the book, but in Ghana, and one's going like this with what looks like a rock, and it's like, oh my God, is he going to throw that and hurt somebody? But he just, he might actually have just a ball in his hand. He's throwing it to his friend. But you don't know that when you look at the rectangle. And no matter where it is, there's something. Or there's another picture that you have chosen from also from Mexico with a little girl holding a bottle, and there's a lady carrying her bags, and you have the weather and you have the street. That's a quiet picture,
Yeah.
but it tells a lot about the whole feeling of what's going on. And that was because I was sitting on a step until people stopped paying attention to me, and just I was changing film.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Now, switching a little bit gears, I wanted to discuss about some very, let's say, common themes in contemporary street photography. Because starting from you, as we've been said so far, you began working seriously in a period where public space, privacy, the circulation of images were very different from now. Can now the candid tradition continue unchanged in a society where everybody is both a photographer and a potential subject?
It has changed. It's changed tremendously. I mean, I heard a lecture recently by Joel Meyerowitz, and he said, when I was starting out in the 60s, nobody took pictures of anything on the street, and nobody even expected that you were taking a picture of them. Whereas now it's like, why are you taking my picture? And there are laws against it now, which there weren't a long time ago, and there weren't when I was starting out. I mean, when I was walking around Louisville covering a public event or just walking through a street fair looking for ambient weirdness. He'd go, "Oh, because I had a big camera at the time, and a flash and all this. If it was nighttime, are you from the newspaper? You going to take my picture? Am I going to be in the newspaper?" And that was exciting, and people wanted me to take a picture. And then it subtly changed. It's like, don't take my picture because everybody's taking pictures all the time. And the funniest thing is, if you have a camera like a regular camera, even a Leica or a small Fuji or whatever you're using, people will look and they'll object. But you hold up a phone and it's like, oh, nobody pays any attention because everybody has a phone and everybody's clicking all the time on a phone.
Exactly. It's crazy. Doorbells.
Security guards will go after you if you have a camera, but everybody has a phone. They don't pay any attention to it. And yet, if I was up to something, I'd be using a phone because it isn't obvious.
For sure, for sure. And that's a different thing. Like, I feel like, and because people, there are so many different really bad things happening with revenge pornography or like
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
cyberbullyism now extremizing quite a lot of things compared to doing candid street photography in the streets where we have surveillance cameras, doorbells have cameras, like you can be everywhere in seconds. Like your picture could have been taken and be everywhere in a second. And do you think that does the legal right to photograph in public still offer an adequate ethical framework, or is legality only the beginning of the question?
Well, I think there's also, I mean, in some countries you can't. I mean, that's,
Totally.
officially, I mean, you can, but you're supposed to ask permission, or if you're going to use it, you definitely have to ask permission. Like, especially like Germany and France and some of the Central European countries have
Yeah.
passed these laws supposedly to protect everyone's privacy. Although personally, this is a controversial personal opinion. I think it's mostly a self-protection law for politicians and lawyers. But you have to be discreet now. You really have to think about, and also you have to be ethical. If someone says, "Don't take my picture," okay, don't take their picture. We all have a right to say no.
No, exactly.
And you have to respect that as something that a human being, has a right to, as you do. If you were to say to me, "Don't take my picture now," I wouldn't then follow you around and continue to take your picture
Yeah,
because that's not a good thing to do.
absolutely.
That then you're crossing a line, and that is a line I won't cross. I'm not a photojournalist looking for a story,
Mm,
and that's a very different thing. But but then, and the other thing is, with I think a lot of us who do this, we're really fast and we're really quiet. They might say, "Don't take my picture," but I've already taken the picture
yeah,
before they even know it.
noticed. Yeah.
And that's a different thing, and chances are it may not be a good picture anyway. I've had people say, "Delete the picture," and once or twice I have, and shown them that I deleted it. But you know what? Turns out it probably wasn't a good picture anyway, and there's always more pictures. The picture you might have to delete will not be the best picture of your life. Now, there's always more.
More
I
and
mean,
better.
street photography is a heartbreak. It's 1,000 to 1.
Yeah. For sure, for sure. And it's interesting because you said something about invisibility a couple of seconds ago, and I want to discuss this because street photography has often celebrating invisibility, the photographer as the fly on the wall, not interacting with the scene. Do you think it's still possible to be invisible today or just desirable?
Invisible, no, but you can think of yourself as like, if you sort of put yourself in the mental space that I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just a guy hanging out. I'm not very interesting. I'm just being quiet here. And you think that inside yourself, that will bleed outward
Mm,
also. Whereas if you're sneaking around and you're really nervous, this is when you give a workshop and you have people say, "I'm not comfortable taking pictures of people. They might see me." Well, anyone who's that nervous and uncomfortable, everybody sees them. Everybody sees them for 100
yeah,
meters
correct.
because they're giving off nervous, guilty, trying to hide vibes. No, forget it. It's not going to work. You
I've
have to be comfortable. Yeah,
Yes. No, no, no. Go ahead. Didn't want to
that's
interrupt
all.
you.
Please, Lucrezia.
Going towards the end of this very, very fun and interesting interview. If a book is a indirect, let's say, self-portrait made through strangers by the photographer, of course, what does it reveal about you that you would have never been able, I guess, maybe to say?
Well, I think our psychological inner state will
Mm,
show in our pictures, not in individual pictures, but as an aggregate. Like if I look over my contact sheets from a 3-month period, I'll know how I was feeling. I mean, a friend of mine came over from New York my first 3 months here, and I asked her about, I said, "Hey, want to look at these contact sheets?" And she said, "Sure." So she flew through them and said, Well, there's some good images here, but mostly what I see is distant, maybe angry and alienated. I say, yeah, that about sums it up because I was coming to grips with a new place. I wasn't sure where I was, what my role was.
Yeah.
And I think that showed in the pictures as a group, not any individual image.
After spending a lifetime preserving fractions of second, has photography changed your relationship with the passage of time?
Yes, because
And
it's a physical memory. It's like
hmm,
people say, oh, I don't remember this, I don't remember that. When I go through my contact sheets and then my digital archive, I remember everything because there it is. It's a physical memory that presents something, whereas without that, we'll have a vague memory. And I thought it was this, I thought it was that. I'll go through a picture that I vaguely remember from, 30 years ago, say, oh, that was great. And then I get there. It's like, no, it wasn't.
not so much.
Because again, I
Yeah.
remember how hard it was to make the picture, what the circumstances were. But now I look at the little thing on the contact sheet, doesn't work. There's too much space. The relationship doesn't quite work between the two characters in the frame. So yeah, it does affect the photographer's own mind that way.
Okay, interesting. Very final question. In your work, everyday pedestrians look like
Mhm.
actors executing, I guess, an invisible choreography. Follow me in this kind of
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah.
If the eye is truly restless, how does a photographer know when to press the shutter and contemporary, when to simply lower the camera down, step back, and let, I guess, the moment belong to the street?
Well, some days I don't feel it. I just don't feel it. Things might be happening. I could be missing them. I could be facing the wrong way, and what's going on is behind me, and I'll miss it. You just using the metaphor that you just started with, especially in a city where you get light bouncing around and the sun bouncing off a window and illuminating a spot on the sidewalk. I think of that as a theater set. The street is a theater set, and those little lights are the spotlights, the little reflections or bouncing off a window. And okay, I've got the set, I've got the lighting. Now, where are the actors? And if the actors come through, are they going to go into the right place? And the excitement of trying to get all of that together. And will they have something interesting when they go through that spot and I click the shutter? That's the hardest part at the very end because you might have something that's well lit beautifully. You get a perfect reflected, polarized spotlight on their face, but it's just not interesting. A technically perfect, boring picture. And there's far too, we all see too much of that presented as great. Yes, it's technically perfect. You got everything placed right, but so what?
It's emotionless.
Exactly. Exactly. Whereas sometimes someone will be coming through and they've got a look on their face. A lot of people have done wonderful things with that kind of stuff. And I think of some of my colleagues from UP photographers, like Melissa O'Shaughnessy is so good at that and the things that she's done on the streets of New York. And that's what I'm looking for. That's what we're waiting for.
Richard, I thank you so, so much for being with me today. In this couple of weeks, I started to knowing you, and you are legit where you are right now. And I thank you so much for the honesty, the sincerity. And I hope I made you feel comfortable as much as you made me feel comfortable.
Well, that's good. I'm sorry we didn't have enough laughs, but
No,
that's something else. Hopefully
that's
people
something
will
for
laugh at my
later.
pictures. Yeah.
No, that's something for later just for us. No, 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 just
Yeah.
joking.
But I will say one thing. I've had a lot of exhibitions, physical exhibitions on walls over the many, many years because I
Yeah,
started out in the era before internet and the only way you could show things was either in books or in exhibitions. And I
absolutely.
always thought that I had a successful exhibition if I had heard people laughing at the pictures.
I love
To me,
that.
that's a great success.
I love that. Yes, absolutely agreed. The joy of photography. Absolutely so. And I just want to remind everybody who's watching that Restless Eye is available for pre-order until September 30th. So please go ahead and check it out because it will never be printed again after that date. And again, a very small message to keep liking and keep subscribing. What's a very small click to you? It means the world for us.
Lucrezia, it was my great pleasure. Thank you.